Hey, it's Dane. Today I want to talk about jumping and landing for fursuiters. This video isn't specific to furries or fursuiters. It can be applied to anyone who's doing cosplay, but the point is to add a little bit of parkour techniques to your performances and how to safely do so. And this is one of the most basic things that I teach any of my parkour students, is the very first obstacle and the most common obstacle that we face in doing parkour, the ground. So it all starts with how you run. You might go to a track and you see some people running, maybe a little bit stomping around, and you might see them landing on the heel of their foot and rolling to the front of their foot where their toes are and pushing off again, otherwise known as a heel-toe strike. What we focus on in parkour is more of a toe-heel strike. So right where your toes attach to your foot, which is called the balls of your feet, you want to try and land your foot there as best you can. A good way to try this is when you jog in place. Most likely when you're jogging in place, you're actually lifting off the balls of your feet and then landing back down on the exact same spot of your foot. The whole point here is to use your ankle as an extra joint, to use those muscles in your feet to absorb more of the impact rather than it going to your knees. Less impact on the ground also means less sound. The whole point of this exercise is to illustrate our next move, which is something called a 2-point landing. 2-point means 2 points of contact with the ground. Now it starts with a low crouch. The idea is you want to have your feet together and your knees apart. Try to keep your back relatively straight as best as you can. And the idea is once you get the hang of this balance, it's a nice central position to come back to, which will also come in handy in future videos. But in this 2-point landing, I kind of want you to move your hips around and see how well you can balance side to side, forward and back. It's also good to practice as a warm-up and get a nice stretch going. Now that we're low to the ground, I want you to try and take a little bit of a jump. Just come right off the floor, just a few inches is fine, and then come right back down to that 2-point landing. While you're in the air, try to keep your legs extended, but have them relaxed. So when you touch the ground, you can start using your legs to resist that force and land nice and quietly. Again, quiet means less impact means less injury. The idea here is we want to be as safe as possible, especially when you're in a fursuit trying to perform. Once you've practiced this a couple times out of costume, what you could do is try jumping higher. A good way to get some extra height is loading your legs from that 2-point landing. You can tuck your knees toward your chest in midair. Just make sure you're looking down at the ground so you know how far away it is and where your feet are. Make sure you're tucking your knees to your chest instead of your feet going behind you. You don't want to lose sight of your feet because then you don't know how to judge the distance between your feet and the ground. And this is what I would use for a static high jump. So in a fursuit, the only thing you really have to look out for here is the lack of visibility with a fursuit head. So make sure you can look low enough to see your feet or your feet paws, or at least have a really good idea how far away the ground is. Whether this is through practice or you could try touching the ground with your paw, and so you can get a really good feel of exactly how far away it is and keep that in your head. The other thing fursuits might encounter is when you pull your knees to your chest, you may run the risk of popping a seam. A good way to test for this is when you practice your 2-point landing on the ground first. See how low you can squat in a fursuit before you feel any kind of tension. Try not to push past that tension or you'll pop a seam. Again, it's best to take baby steps, try little short hops first, then try bigger jumps. Always practice out of suit first, and then practice the move in costume. If you need a few steps in between that to get used to it, you can try different variations of your costume. For fursuits, you could try just wearing the head or just wearing the feet. Once you feel comfortable with static jumping, we'll move on to jumping to an object at a distance. The key here is when you jump to an object, you actually want to jump up and come down on top of the object. The reason for this is because if you're jumping to something, and let's say that something has sand or gravel or it might be slippery, or something happens to where you slip because you're going to have horizontal momentum. Now, trying this in fursuit, the first thing you're going to encounter is a problem with traction. So feet paws generally don't have the most traction on the bottom. You may have outdoor paws or sandals or things like that, but it's best not to try and rely on that. So it's extra important to maintain that trajectory of jumping up and down on top of something. But even jumping up and down onto something, you may still have some forward momentum. Now there's another position called a 4-point landing that could help with that. So what this looks like in practice, let's crouch back down to our 2-point landing. And then what you're going to do is lean forward. And you're going to plant your palms, not your fingers, in front of you. The reason we don't use our fingers is because fingers are fragile. And with this kind of impact of jumping around, you could possibly break a finger. Because what you're going to do is you're going to land in a 2-point landing, and if you keep going with that momentum, with that force you have, you can dissipate it on the landing to your hands, meaning you're going to be leaning forward and absorbing that with your triceps as you do a push-up. This is great if you're going even further distance and you're really pushing the limit of how far you can jump. It's also great for landing at greater heights. If you're landing on something maybe waist height to head height, I would definitely recommend doing a 4-point landing. Anything higher than your head, well, that's when we start getting into parkour rolls, which I'd like to cover in another video. But for now, let's focus on seeing how far you can jump and doing a 4-point landing. In a fursuit, again, you're going to have some traction issues. So make sure you practice at shorter and shorter distances until you become more comfortable of jumping further away. Also be careful not to smack your snout or anything on your fursuit head into one of your limbs or the ground. Also, with a 4-point landing, you may have noticed that you can use other techniques that tie onto that, such as crawling, which again, I'd like to cover in another video. But until then, have fun jumping around, hopping about, landing as safely as you can, as far as you can, and making it look cool. If you have any questions or like to share your own experiences, please leave a comment below. And as always, thank you for watching.